Hey, so we're gonna have some fun this week, or at least I had some fun this week. Uh, um, uh, Basically, what I plan to do is I went to Stonecrop about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and did a bunch of shots of, as you can see on the right, of the tulips and daffodils and assorted other things which are abundantly coming up at Stonecrop Gardens in Cold Springs. Um, Beautiful place, just lovely, grounds and all that. And what I'm going to do today is I mixed the the garden from Stonecrop with some paintings that I thought were inspired by gardens, and much of the work that I'm going to show is at least half of it is going to be from American Impressionists. Um, Others are basically European painters like Bouillard, which is the image that's on the left right now. Um,
Larry,
yeah,
could you just talk a little louder or put the
sure.
mic closer to you? Thank you.
Yes, that's easy enough to do. How's that?
Better.
Better? Okay,
Yeah.
you got it. Okay. Um, so I usually talk so loud that wherever the mic is, it picks it up. Anyway, um, so basically, we're going to go for a ride today. So enjoy. Basically, it's the garden as artistic inspiration, and uh, the garden as a work of art in and of itself, where Stonecrop is concerned, and how these beds are installed is quite remarkable. Okay, so let's see. All right. Stonecrop Gardens is located in Cold Springs, was originally the home of Anne and Frank Cabot. We visited there last year, but I'm going to go through this anyway because, who the heck is going to remember that? Uh, so it became a public garden in 1992 under the direction of Carol Burgess. Um, it at its windswept 1,100-foot Hudson Highlands location. It's approximately 15 acres. Um, Diverse gardens, plantings through the woodlands, water gardens, grass gardens, raised alpine stone beds. Um, it's very diverse, and it you can walk as long as you want to, but it really is, there are places to sit and just meditate and be with it. um, they they really have created a educational collection there, and there are gardeners there that are more than happy to talk with you about what you're seeing. They give out they give out handout sheets so you can actually know a little bit about what you're looking at. So just lovely place. Um, and here is just an array of the flowers that some of which I saw that were out, and they're my photographs, and some of which are ones that I pulled off the website. Their website is really terrific too. So if you go to the Stonecrop Gardens website, you can see all of this. You do need to make an appointment to go, but it's the grounds are 15 acres, so um, there's not much of a restriction. It's just timing. Okay, Stonecrop began as a private garden in 1958. The Garden Conservancy founder Frank Cabot and his wife Anne built their home atop 60 hilltop acres of fields and woodlands outside Cold Springs. The land was a gift from Anne's grandmother, Evelina Ball Perkins. And that name Perkins might be slightly familiar. Anybody who goes to Bear Mountain knows Perkins Drive. Well, the property that's part of Bear Mountain did belong to the family at one point and was turned over as to the state. Undaunted by wind and rock, they began to garden, and Stonecrop was born. The Cabots were avid collectors of alpine plants, and over the years, the Cabots' garden grew, and they experimented with different species. In the mid-'80s, Frank and Anne had aspirations of Stonecrop becoming a public garden, and they engaged English horticulturalist Carolyn Burgess to direct its development. Stonecrop Gardens has become an important destination for garden visitors and plant enthusiasts since opening in 1992. Along with the acres of planted flower beds, there's a 2,000 square foot conservatory, that floats on a pond near the entry. It houses really tender specimens, so it's definitely worth a visit. And there are formal gardens, and you can see kind of the European quality to the architecture. They definitely fashioned this place, so what I'm going to do is move on to, okay, the European influences on the American garden movement, landscape architecture, and garden design are obvious. The affluence of the late 1800s and the affect of the Grand Tour brought fresh ideas back to the US. Monet's garden at Giverny was a pilgrimage stop for American artists and gardeners. John Muir and actually Audubon were really part of this naturalist movement in America, which is another major force in basically conserving our beautiful landscape in America. So that was all at play at this time. And there was really a group of artists who went to Giverny, and they set up sort of a artist colony there, American artist colony there, in an inn that was near Monet's gardens. Some of them painted in the gardens. Monet did not teach, but he did interact with a lot of the artists, and this fellow John Leslie Breck was one of the artists who basically did become friendly with Monet, and this piece was painted in the gardens at Giverny. The piece on the right is by Charles Hussin, and basically this was on the Isle of Shoals or Appledore Island. I'm not sure exactly. It goes by those two different names. this lady, Celia, ran a boarding house on the island, and Hassim went back year after year and worked in her gardens. And this is a painting that he did of her in the garden. And it doesn't look like there's anything radical about this piece, but in actuality, there is something going on here. You know, she's out there tending the garden, which is something um, that was really kind of new for women to go out and work the garden, which seems odd to us now, but at that time, that was something radical. The fact is, she's not wearing a hat. And that was a statement in and of itself, because you always see women wearing garden hats. Well, there's a reason to wear a garden hat to protect yourself from the sun, but this was actually, she was a one of the founding members of the Audubon Society. At the time, um, feathers were used a lot in hats. And the fact that she is not wearing a hat was part of her protest against the use and and um, and basically annihilation of species of birds. So it's an interesting little note. And there, I, I get that there may have been something going on between Hassim and Celia. Uh, he had a long-term relationship with her. Um, I'm just saying. Anyway, let's see. So this is John Twachtman. Now, one of the things that I wanted to get to is there are a number of artist colonies um, that were struck up when the artists came back from from Europe after the experience at Giverny. Um, Twachtman um, bought a farm in Greenwich, Connecticut, which at the time was the countryside, believe it or not. And he would go out from the city and just paint throughout the summer and go out there often even in the wintertime, just to get away from the intensity of being in New York City. Um, so what you're seeing here is a Twachtman, and on the right is one of my photographs from up at Stonecrop, and I thought, boy, there's a little correlation here. So I'm kind of curating our way through this show at this stage of the game. Um, so there was a artist colony in Greenwich, in Cos Cob, actually the Cos Cob uh, um, impressionists gathered at a place called the Holly. Well, actually, it's the Bush Holly House, um, and that was it was an inn on the coast, and a bunch of the artists that were part of the American Impressionists gathered there and went out and painted in the fields and painted along the coast. So that was one, and the other one is the Florence Griswold. Um, Actually, it's Florence Griswold Museum now, but at the time it was an inn and that was the old Lyme um, Impressionists, and so that group was out there. There was also um, um, in Maine. There's Monhegan. In Massachusetts, there's Provincetown, and there was Gloucester. All these places were artist colonies early on, from around the turn of the century. Um, there was a market for impressionist work. Um, as if some of you were with me for the Monet talk, Duran Roual, who was French dealer, um, set up a gallery in New York and did very well with Impressionist work. So it primed the market for Impressionist painting. So there was a market for this work, and so the artists were working with that. Okay. Now, like I said, I'm going to hop around a little bit. This is of course a wonderful Van Gogh on the right, and my shot of some buds out there at Stonecrop. The intensity and attention to detail is something that goes on in Van Gogh, that twisted, gnarled business, and his interpretation of what this blossoming presence was in the springtime. Um, he had to paint pretty fast to get those things because these blossoms don't last long. And again, this is a Van Gogh on the right, and that sense of dappled light, of that magnificent light playing across things in the springtime. Um, this is a view of the greenhouse at Stonecrop. Um, let's see. Okay, and this is a really lovely watercolor by Child Hassine. Um, it's bright, it's loose, it's very abstract, and very beautifully handled. And that the business of the red mixed in with the green and the yellow. I saw this photograph and said, oh yeah, there's a relationship. Okay. Okay. And this is inside the greenhouse on the left at Stonecrop. So there's these lovely, arrays of succulents and all kinds of things in the greenhouse that they grow throughout the winter, and many of them become interspersed with the plantings out in the gardens later on during the summer. They put them out interspersed with them. On the right is a painting by Mel Blaine, who actually she's more or less a contemporary artist. She died, I guess, in the early '90s, I believe. Wonderful painter, very loose, but you can see, how artists take things from the garden, from nature, and interpret it and play around with it.
Larry, I
Yes.
just want to mention that people are loving your pairing. So we're
Good.
getting a lot of comments.
That's great. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It was like, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. So here again is another Hassine, beautiful abstracted watercolor. I mean, this is 1892. This guy was doing something like this, and really lovely energy, the kind of sense of dappled light, and that conserving. I don't know if any of you ever attempted to do a watercolor, but conserving that white and making that an active part of a watercolor is a really important process. And I, looked at these white tulips and said, yeah, that's it. That's the light. Okay. So this is, up at Stonecrop, there are these, beautiful, banks and stone gardens, and I have, I, some of you may be gardeners, so you may be able to name some of these flowers. I have absolutely no idea what the names are, aside from beautiful. Um, it's not that I'm proud of my ignorance around that, but there's they're just stunning to experience, and that's part of why I wanted to go back. And I will, the thing is that they, week by week, things change up there, so it's worth going back time and again throughout the season to see how things evolve. And this is actually a German impressionist who I'd never seen before, but I thought, this has that kind of quality, that intensity, and the brushwork imitating how the foliage moves and interacts. Okay, we'll keep moving. Okay. And this is the conservatory, the greenhouse, basically, that's floating in the pond. It's really quite remarkable. And the plants that are inside, you've seen some of them. I showed some of those earlier, were from inside this place. They have some tropical plants and some plants that are just like, they're germinating in there, and then they're going to plant them out in the garden later. But it's just, this is a lovely spot to just sit and meditate. As you can see across the pond, there are a couple of people taking a seat and just meditating on it. And the interpretation of spring, how do you catch that? How do you catch that ephemeral quality, that these buds, these flowers, these leaves are changing day by day? How do you catch that? That's a dilemma for most artists. And Fairfield Porter's answer to that was just try and catch the subtle harmonies of how those colors interact. And he would use these big, bold patches of paint, but use really subtle, harmonic colors to kind of evoke that feeling. And again, we're back to Monet. And I was looking at this photograph and looking at the flowers that are and leaves that are in shadow, and look at how the light shows through them, and look at how the ones that are in the light kind of dissolve into the background, but are still there with the vibrant color. So tonally, they're very close to everything that's behind them, but they pop because of that vibrant green. So Monet was very much playing with these ideas in his work, and the American Impressionists picked up on that information and carried it, and actually made it their own in a certain way. Okay. This is John Singer Sargent painting Monet out painting. And Sargent, during the 1880s, was very much under the influence of Monet in a way. He was doing these lovely impressionist sketches. and some of them were executed, in watercolor, but many of them were oils too. Um, and I looked at this and looked at the light and looked at the play going on and said, oh yeah, look at that. Man, there's that's Stonecrop, but it's in Giverny. Uh, okay, and here again we have Monet with the Wisteria. And the interesting and intriguing part about this piece is it's kind of like what Monet did was take the violet out of the wisteria and put it in the sky and let the light come out of the wisteria blossoms. Very interesting concept, kind of the positive and negative space, this business of the unpainted area being the blossom, and the sky having more color than the blossoms. Interesting guy. Okay. And here's one of these lovely tranquil ponds up at Stonecrop. And on the left is Willard Metcalf, who was an American impressionist, and you know this is Trout Stream, basically. This is near Old Lyme, so this is from the Old Lyme School. On the right is John Twachtman, and he was from the Cos-Cob Greenwich group. So it's interesting to see. It's not like they didn't interact, or people who went to Cos-Cob didn't go to Old Lyme. The people that went to Old Lyme didn't go to Cos-Cob. They did both. Okay. And again, what I wanted to bring out in this is the intensity of Van Gogh, and how he used the brushwork to articulate the intensity of observation of nature, and the amount of things that are going on out there. This close observation of things, and how do you interpret that? How do you give the feeling of those petals and the flowers and the interaction of the leaves, um, that are constantly in motion and constantly changing? Um, the intensity of the detail that's in there. How do you catch the energy of that? That's what he was after. Okay, and this is again, we're back to the Bush Holly House and Cos-Cob, and this is one of the gardens that's out in the back of that. Now, the Bush Holly House is open to the public. Okay, it is a museum, and they do have some many of the Cos-Cob painters are represented in the collection there. And it's basically the Greenwich Historical Society has this whole compound in there. It's well worth a visit. Along with the Bruce Museum, there's a lot to see over there. There's also the Brandt Foundation, but that's a whole other conversation. Okay, and this is a detail of the Bush Holly House, painted in the 1890s. And I lost the artist's name, unfortunately, but but he's one of the American Impressionists that we're focused on here. And you can see how thick the paint is. The paint is really kind of troweled on there. Um, these guys were very influenced by Monet's approach to painting. Okay, and these two pieces I found really interesting. Um, it's kind of like positive and negative of this the concept in here. You've got these straight white birch trees on looking up at a cliff, and it's fall. Here you're looking down into the pond, and it's spring. Um, you've got these nice dark limbs that are growing out from these centers, and the birches are spread out over the whole thing. So there's all these contrasts in these two pieces that I really enjoyed. And there's also movement in the composition, which is kind of similar. So I was like, I had fun with that. I was like, oh, look at this. All right. So we're we're back to Hasim at the Florence Griswold. Now, the the Griswold Museum was a boarding house, and it had a long storied history. Um, uh, they actually had, it was a school for girls at one point, and and by the late 1880s, 1890s, um, the curriculum that they were teaching was no longer of value. That they wanted young women um, to go on to actually higher learning and to college. They didn't want them learning how to do samplers and to basically the 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 ladies things to learn, whatever those were at that time, went out of fashion, and they wanted you know young women to be educated and go on to college and things like that in the upper classes. So the 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 Griswold house transferred over to an artist colony, and um, this was Hasim's studio out there. So there were these studio shacks on the property that the artists used to go out and use, um, when the weather was inclement or whatever. Uh, and here is Matilda Brown, and this lady was quite a remarkable painter, and I'd never heard of her before. There's a number of her pieces that I found, and it's so loose and luscious. And this is her version of the Francis Griswold house, Ms. Francis's. Uh, uh, so it's quite remarkable. There were quite a few women impressionists that were doing very well, and in fact, Matilda Brown was very successful. She lived into the 40s, I believe, and had quite a long career, deservedly. Um, okay, And I'm not even going to try and pronounce this guy's name, but the intensity of this piece is quite remarkable. Um, and it is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. These patterns and the use, the way he takes that pattern of the grass up into the dress and differentiates her from the background by changing the pattern of the blossoms around her. It very much reminds me of a Edward Vouillard painting, where the figure is dissolves into pattern in the background and and emerges out of that. Um, Beautiful piece. And this dazzling intensity of the fuchsia plant and the interior of the greenhouse just reminded me of that kind of dazzling energy. Okay. Just going to take a breath. And these things, whatever the hell they are, if anybody knows, please tell me. I'm gonna have to find out the next time I go up there. But these beautiful things, I have no idea what they are, but they're just gorgeous. And it reminded me of Georgia O'Keeffe, the kind of very subtle but large, sumptuous areas and shapes, and how the subtle light plays across them.
Larry, somebody said they thought it was hosta,
Could
but
be
I've seen
hosta.
hosta, and that's not what the flower looks like.
I have no
Although I'm
idea.
not sure.
It could be some version of a hosta. I don't know.
Oh, that's true. It could be.
They have very exotic plants there.
Oh
So
gosh.
okay, and this is Maria Oakley Dewing, who was married to another artist. I believe his name was James Dewing. He was very well known. He did these kind of misty fields with kind of apparition-like ladies roaming around in them. But this piece just struck me. She was a gardener, and she took such care with the view that she took of these flowers. Um, the the quality of almost like a tapestry in how she painted them. Um, it's like an ant's eye view of these flowers, but it's very much of the earth. It's very, the texture, the background, the those the kind of abstract mark making that she used for the leaves in the background, but the intensity of her focus. It also reminds me of a symbolist painter by the name of Odelay Redon, who was a French symbolist, and so it's got that kind of layered quality to it. Like it's um, very evocative. Um, okay. And this is the Francis Griswold Garden, uh, which is also lovely and worth a trip to Old Lyme as far as I'm concerned. And on the right is a a spring view um, from Old Lyme by Medcalf. Okay, so here's the story. Uh, this is the little bridge in the pond up there, and that's really beautiful too. This is another view of that. Um, there is a show coming to the Brandywine Museum in October of the American Impressionism, echoes of a revolution, um, and there is also a really wonderful film, um, The Artist's Garden, American Impressionism and the Garden Movement. And this film is available on Canopy. Um, and it basically goes through a lot more of what I've been talking about the Cos Cob and the Old Lyme, and there's a Pennsylvania group of painters that were an artist colony there. Um, this show um, was back in 2015, so it was 2015 to 2017. It toured the United States and was at the Philadelphia Academy, went down to Texas, and actually went to the Florence Griswold Museum out in Old Lyme. Um, that's past, but the American Impressionism show is coming up. There's also a lecture by Anna Marley, who was the curator of the show, so that can be gotten to on YouTube.
I just want to
So,
mention, last week I said Canopy was disappearing, but I misspoke. We will still have Canopy on our online resources, so you could all see it. And what I saw instead was, what I confused it with was Acorn. Acorn is of the British mysteries and whatnot. So I somehow mixed them up. But Canopy is still available on our website. And if you haven't gone to Canopy, you're missing something. It's got all the films and so many more items on our website, and you can access them through our online resources and then click on e-media, MEDIA. So
we
this
we
was a
still have a
treat.
we still have a few more minutes, so I may just
Okay.
flip back through our slide thing, just so.
Well, I like the way you pause because you want everyone to appreciate
Yeah.
these images. You do that often, and it's very nice.
We can use all the peace that we can get at this stage of the game. I really did want to take a break from the kind of intensity that I've been presenting with Basquiat and Nikki de Saint Phal. There's a number of these people, and Alice Neal. They're all very intense characters, and we're moving on to intense characters next week. Um, Soutine and de Kooning. Uh, so I figured it'd be a good thing to take a little break.
There were so many compliments, Larry, that everyone should know. Not only did they love the pairing, but they loved your selections.
Oh, that's
And
great.
so it's really good. And while we're looking at it, I just want to remind everybody that the library is now open many more hours beginning on the 17th. You're still required to wear a mask, and there's no seating or using the computers. but the library will be open for browsing, and I hope you will all come. And there was just another question. Somebody wanted to know, what kind of camera do you use?
I have a really beautiful Nikon. It's an SLR, you know, so I can see what's going on.
Which Nikon?
Oh,
You said.
I'd have to go look.
Well, if you remember next week, I think
Yes.
everybody would like to know.
Sure.
Because your photos are unbelievable, besides being so unbelievably clear.
So this actually, I didn't mention it, but this gazebo should be in blossom sometime during the next couple of weeks. It's not this way right now. When I went, it wasn't in bloom, but it should be blooming. And actually, you can email them and ask them when it's going to be in bloom, because they had this gazebo covered with the wisteria, but there's also some arches. I didn't include that one. I couldn't include everything. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. It was beautiful. And thank you all for coming. A feast for the eyes, somebody just wrote, and it truly was. So thank you all for coming. Have a good weekend. The weather is supposed to be beautiful. And we hope to see you at the next program, which is the Foreign Policy Discussion Group at 10 o'clock on Monday. Don't forget to go to our website, which is chappaqua.library.org.
And go to Stonecrop.
And go to Stonecrops, right. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Larry, and thank you all for coming.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.